Hi all, welcome to the A-Level Law Essay channel. This is a specially requested episode by one of the viewers. I don't have plans to cover any A2 chapters now, but since some of my students are also going to sit for their A2 papers, I thought that I should make one before your exams. In this episode, the essay is going to be covering the chapter consideration in the contract syllabus, and more specifically regarding the performance of existing contracts. It is my first problem-based scenario question for this channel, and so the format may be a little bit different from my previous video tutorials. Before we begin, please subscribe to my channel for more video guides on essay writing and many other interesting topics. And if you are a subscriber and regular viewer of my videos, thank you. I would appreciate it if you do like and share my videos with your friends so that they can benefit from my remote guidance as well. Thanks. With that said, let's get started with part 1 of video guide number 9. Question. The question reads, in January, Bobby the Builder was employed by Carrie Curry, a local celebrity, to erect a one-story marble statue of her likeness so that she can unveil her own glory to all of her fans in her hometown on her 40th birthday bash in May of the same year. The price was agreed as £1 million for the completion of the statue on the day before her birthday. After encountering a lot of problems in the early stages of the project, it was clear that the statue cannot be erected in time for Carrie's birthday bash, as it was already the month of April and the statue was not even halfway done. Bobby explained to Carrie that he needs more money to buy new equipment to work faster and finish the project on time. Carrie, in her desperation, promised to pay Bobby an extra £500,000 if he can finish the project by the eve of her birthday bash. Without hesitation, Bobby sold his house so that he can have enough money to buy the new equipment needed to finish the project. As soon as the new equipment arrived, Bobby was able to finish erecting the statue in a very short period of time, and by the end of April, the one-story marble statue of Carrie Curry was erected in its full glory. Upon inspecting and admiring her own glorious marble statue, she told Bobby that he has done an excellent job, but she will not pay him the extra £500,000 as it wasn't part of the original agreement. Discuss Bobby the Builder's legal right to the additional payment promised by Carrie Curry. To answer a scenario-based problem question, it is important to first identify the relevant parties and the issues that they are having with each other. From the scenario, we know that the contracting parties are Bobby the Builder and Carrie Curry. The contract between the two of them was for Bobby to finish erecting her statue by her birthday for the price of £1 million. Due to some problems, Bobby cannot finish it on time, and Carrie promised him an extra £500,000 if he can finish the project on time. However, upon its completion, Carrie refuses to pay Bobby. Naturally, the problem here, as per the question, is to discuss whether or not Bobby has a legal right to claim the additional payment that was promised by Carrie. After identifying these two important things, we should then be able to figure out which chapter in the contract syllabus this question is covering. By the looks of some of the key points in the scenario, it is safe to say that it covers the chapter consideration and that it focuses on the topic performance of an existing contractual duty. Introduction. As this is a contract question, we should begin by defining contract as a legally binding agreement between parties to perform certain obligations towards each other. After that, explain that the formation of contract requires the main elements to the formation of contracts to be satisfied. Here, we should emphasize offer, acceptance, and especially consideration, since the question pretty much covers these aspects of the formation of contract. After a brief definition of contract, we should highlight the facts and the issue within the facts briefly, i.e., what was the original agreement and what of the extra payment. The thesis statement should state that we will first consider if contract is formed and then consider if the additional money is part of that contract. Point 1. Formation of contract. To consider if the contract between Bobby and Carrie was formed or not, we should first briefly go through the main elements in the formation of a contract. Even though we know from the facts that there isn't any issue with the formation of contract, but for the sake of a detailed content and showing the examiner that we know our stuff, we should develop our answer properly. All we need to take note of is that this part of the answer is just the bridging point between the introduction and the part where we actually address and answer the question. So, not much attention should be given to it. Since this is a bilateral contract situation, we should explain that a bilateral contract exists when two parties exchange promises to each other, whereby one will make an offer and the other will accept the offer in return. A communication will be treated as an offer if it indicates the terms on which the offerer is prepared to make in a contract, and this can be briefly contrasted from a situation in which a person is just making an invitation to treat. Here, you may opt to briefly mention Carlisle versus Carbolic Smoke Balls 1892 and Gibson versus Manchester City Council 1979 to back up your explanation. An acceptance must be made unconditionally to the precise terms of the offer, otherwise a contract is not formed. The case of Teen versus Hoffman and Co. 1873 should be mentioned to support this legal principle. Now that the legal principles have been highlighted, we should then highlight the facts of the case and then apply the legal principles to it. On the facts, £1 million was offered by Carrie to Bobby to finish the project for her birthday bash, and Bobby has presumably agreed to do so. Therefore, a valid contract was formed. However, the more important question that should be highlighted now is, what about the additional £500,000 upon the completion of the project? To answer this question, we will first have to discuss if there is any element of consideration in the contract. Point 2. Consideration. Start off by defining consideration as being something which represents some benefit and detriment to both contracting parties. Highlight the case Dunlop versus Selfridge 1915. This contractual principle needs to be discussed in detail as it is the focus topic in the question. Apart from that, by discussing consideration in detail, we can relate to what we are going to discuss about later when we address the issue regarding the extra £500,000 payment. Next, briefly explain and discuss some of the basic characteristics of consideration. For example, consideration must not be past, consideration must be sufficient but need not be adequate, etc. Case examples for this part is unnecessary since there is no issue regarding its characteristics. Now that the legal principles have been highlighted, we should then highlight the facts of the case and then apply the legal principles to it. On the fact, the consideration in which the parties exchanged were £1 million for the completion of the statue by the date of Carrie's birthday bash in May. Now that we have established the element of consideration in the contract, we should then address the issue regarding the £500,000 payment. Because it isn't part of the original contract as stated by Carrie when she refused to pay Bobby, it would seem that she has no other legal obligation within the contract other than paying Bobby the agreed £1 million. However, in order to address the question on whether or not Bobby has any legal right to claim for the extra £500, we will need to consider if his performance of an existing contractual duty amounts to valid consideration. Point 3. Performance of an existing contractual duty. To link this point to the previous point, we should highlight the main principle of consideration by stating that if a promisee already owes the promissor a legal duty, then in theory, performing that duty should not in itself be consideration, as the promisee is doing nothing more than what he is obliged to do. In order to help Bobby, we need to ask, Can there exist consideration in the performance of an existing contractual duty? Before we get into that, the two cases of Stilt v. Myrick 1809 and Hartley v. Ponsonby 1957 should be contrasted, whereby the principles and reasoning for allowing consideration to arise in such situations should be explained. The main legal principle in these cases states that a promisee is entitled to pay which is not part of the original contract if what the promisee has done is beyond the duties stipulated within the original contract. If we apply this principle to the case, is it possible to argue that Bobby did actually do more than what he was contracted to do? To further address this issue in favor of Bobby, and also to answer the question as it is intended to be answered, the principle under the case of Williams v. Roffey 1991 must be explained and properly illustrated so that we can link it to the scenario in the question. Here, if one party's promise to perform an existing contractual duty to supply goods or services confers an additional practical benefit on the other party, then providing that no duress is involved, it will be sufficient consideration to make a promise given in return binding. Therefore, applying this legal principle to the facts, the question is whether or not there is any practical benefit and is there any duress on any of the contracting parties. If applied in Bobby's favor, the principle laid in Williams' case should be satisfied, and the exception of consideration's general rule may be applied in the scenario, and Bobby should be entitled to the extra £500,000 payment as promised on top of the original price. We should definitely explain the reasoning behind this and state that just like in Williams' case, Carrie, the promisor, has definitely benefited from the new deal as the project was finished in time for her birthday bash. Conclusion. The conclusion should be a simple one. The only thing that should be highlighted here is the main legal principle and points of argument which brings us to the resolution of the dispute regarding the extra payment of £500,000. And most certainly, we should mention that Bobby is able to claim the extra payment of £500,000 as promised on top of the original price. Review. Before we end, let's have a quick review on the content guide. In the introduction, we briefly defined contract, the requirements for its formation, and highlighted the facts and issue of the scenario before we moved on to the thesis statement stating our objective for the whole essay. In point 1, we developed our essay by establishing the requirements for the formation of a valid contract and applied it to the scenario and concluded that there was a valid contract before an issue arose. In point 2, we endeavored to define consideration and discuss its characteristics and legal principles, and then applied to the scenario, establishing that the original contract involves executory considerations. However, the issue regarding the extra pay isn't included in the consideration. In point 3, we critically considered if there is consideration even if there is already a pre-existing contractual duty. The case and legal principle under Williams' case is discussed in detail, and we established that if we argue the legal principle in favor of Bobby, he is entitled to the extra pay. We concluded it by summing up our discussion and highlighting some of the more important points in the whole content of the answer, and end the essay by stating that Bobby is entitled to the extra pay. That is the end of the content guide for this video tutorial. If you have any questions or opinions on my approach to answering the question, please do comment below. Do check out part 2 of this video tutorial, where I will go through with you a sample essay on this question. I will put a link to it in the description below. If you find this video tutorial useful, please like, share and subscribe to my channel for more. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.